sounds familiar to the Quetzalcoatl, as the entire area is completely littered with terrestrialized crystals, emphasizes a depiction of a hexagonal crystal on its side, a light structure known as Pathra, and its signature move called Lumina Crash, where the peculiar light that is able to affect minds of their crystal-like bodies are responsible for their respective gimmicks, and they look just like the terrestrialized crystals. Eternatus, after the Darkest Day 3,000 years ago, Sandy Shocks physically doesn't make sense. It seems to imply that in actuality, all of them are seemingly fake.
In part 1, we talked about how the Disc Pokemon share several connections to Eternatus and Necrozma through its lore and abilities. But now that we understand that there is a potential relation, I think it's important to further examine the powers of the Disc Pokemon itself. Which brings us to the Paradox Pokemon, which, as the name suggests, are paradoxical and contradictory by nature. As we established in part 1, the existence of Paradox Pokemon just doesn't make sense. For instance, Brute Bonnet resembles a Pokeball, an invention that dates less than 200 years ago. Yet, the Amoonguss line developed its look to resemble the Pokeball specifically to fool Pokemon and humans. So then, the implication is that they aren't actually Pokemon from different times, but rather creations of the Disc Pokemon instead. This mystery is even brought up in-game, with Arven saying, "Isn't my mom's time machine the whole reason the ancient and future Pokemon ended up here in the first place? My mom believed that nonsense, and managed to make it a reality." Arven realizes that Sada and Turo's time machine have yet to be made at this point, so how can the Paradox Pokemon exist in the Scarlet and Violet book 200 years ago then? Well, we know that Heath encounters the Disc Pokemon somehow, as he has an entry talking about it, as well as the Phantom Memory, in which he was speaking to someone or something. But how could the Disc Pokemon erase his memories of the event if we are to assume that it actually has the capacity to alter memories? Remember Espathra and its move Lumina Crash, which was able to use light in a way that could affect the mind of its target. The art in the Phantom Memory entry actually shows that same hexagon present in the attack animation. So it could also imply that this power to manipulate minds and potentially memories actually originates from the Disc Pokemon. So if the Disc Pokemon can affect the minds of individuals and create projections, could it be possible to assume it's using the thoughts and desires of people in Pokemon to create said projections? I mean, look at Heath, who allegedly saw a Paradox Donphan. After traveling for days throughout AreaZero and hearing strange sounds, tensions were high. His team apparently saw and suffered an attack from a weird-looking Donphan. They managed to draw them, but their design still doesn't fully match the actual Paradox Pokemon that we see in-game. Great Tusk has a completely different tail and spine pattern as well as different feet. Meanwhile, Iron Tread's entire leg structure is completely off. Even the photographs, which are supposed to be definitive proof, have inconsistencies, with Great Tusk lacking the mascara and having a different spine shape from its actual depiction in-game. Iron Treads looks virtually the same, but its design is a lot simpler. Regular Donphan and Phanpy do spawn in AreaZero, so is it possible that due to his obsession with discovering the unknown area and the fear from unfamiliar cries, that he could have mistaken an actual Donphan for what would later become the Paradox Donphan, manifesting in its existence and causing the attack? As to why it differs from the modern-day Paradox Pokemon, we have to remember that they arrived from Sada and Turo's time machine. A Sada and Turo who are infatuated with the book to the point where they're able to abandon their own son for it. So then it seems as though the difference in detail comes from the way that two different parties imagine their fantasies, with the photograph and the sketch being Heath's depiction, and the modern-day Paradox Donphan being Sada and Turo's vision based on the books. So their desire and belief in nonsense became a reality. This is strengthened by the fact that Heath's partner Pokemon, Cyclizar, is the Paradox Legendary. Heath's Cyclizar had a more personal bond with him, which could potentially explain why it's comparatively stronger. If the creation process is linked to desire, then it would make sense that his connection with his closest partner would functionally make it more powerful than the other Paradox Mons. This idea of beliefs fueling the creation is almost outright confirmed by the fact that Heath in the imagined Pokemon entry states that it's merely inspiration and the creativity that created the imagined Pokemon, and yet it was confirmed confirmed to be a real Pokemon by the data miners who found its information in the game. So these imagined Pokemon became real. And what further validates this is terrestrialization. When battling Penny at the end of the Team Star story, she states, "Become who you really want to be," before terrestrializing her Sylveon. Knowing how terrestrialization is tied to the disc Pokemon, it seems as though it's hinting at the innate desire of a Pokemon is what grants them their Terra type, which then produces the hat structure. But by far, the strongest evidence is the fact that AI Sada and Turo are also seemingly implied to be fake in the same way that the Paradox Pokemon are. Just as the Time Machine was made utilizing the power of the terrestrial phenomenon, so was AI Sada and Turo. They themselves say that humanity doesn't have the knowledge to produce real artificial intelligence, but somehow the crystals were capable of doing so? How? That in itself is a contradictory statement, in the same way as the Paradox Pokemon. It only really makes sense if we believe that the desire the original Sada and Turo had, after the frustration of the other partner leaving, was the catalyst for the creation of the AI. In the same way terrestrialized Pokemon discovered 140 years ago weren't able to leave the creator, so are the AI copies unable to leave the Zero Lab, as it disconnects them from these crystals, which seems to suggest that they're one and the same. Like, we literally see their body turn into crystals after the will of the original professor via the protection protocol forces them to fight the protagonist. The story hints at this, as even though the AI's intelligence may be a manifestation of the original, the AI versions still aren't identical. The originals wanted to bring about the Paradox Pokemon and bring them to the present, and it was due to their infatuation with the Scarlet and Violet books that they did so. However, the AI versions desired to be free to explore the world, and free to find their own treasure. And funnily enough, this desire is fully granted in the finale, as we assume the disc Pokemon or the Time Machine in some sort of way was able to transport the AI Turo and Sada through the wormhole. So now we have 3 examples. Heath's desire bringing about the Paradox Donphan and Cyclizar, the imagined Pokemon, and the AI created by Sada and Turo's desire. All of these events, all connected to the disc Pokemon, and all created by desire. Yet Scarlet and Violet doesn't finish here, as there is one more story in Paldea that shows how life can not only be born, but also altered. The mysterious seals across Paldea introduces us to the 4 legendary Ruinous Pokemon, 4 items given life by the victims of negative emotions. In Miss Ryfort's class, we learn about the ancient Paldean king, who around 2,000 years ago poured a great amount of effort, human resources, and financial resources into exploring AreaZero. This obsession held by the kings for over 1,000 years led to the decline of the Paldean Empire. In the next class, she talks about the 4 Ruinous Pokemon and mentions a greedy king, placing them in that 1,000-year period, before stating how the king's greed resulted in the castle being toppled, presumably by the 4. This also seems to be validated by the Pokédex as well, as it states, Wo Chien awoke after the grudge of a man who wrote the king's evil deeds. And looking at the others, we also see a similar theme. Chien Pao awoke to the hatred of those who perished under its blade. The fear poured into a vessel forming Ting-Lu, and the envy poured over the beauty of the beads ignited Chi-Yu. Although these 4 Ruinous Pokemon existed before coming into contact with the king, Miss Ryfort emphasizes that it's not until coming into contact with the king and his greed that they actually became Ruinous. We aren't told explicit detail, but what makes this interesting is that in AreaZero, there is a strange symbol with 4 convenient circles, and Heath directly mentions a potential connection to the Paldean Empire. With the knowledge that this took place during the time of the Paldean Empire's obsession with AreaZero, it feels all too fitting to assume they attempted to use the Ruinous Pokemon in some sort of way to explore and find the treasure of AreaZero. They must have performed some sort of ritual which lines up with Ting-Lu's entry, and I assume it worked, just not in the way the king wanted. Even though the disc Pokemon's energy brings about the desires, rather than being fueled by the king's desire to find the treasure, it was actually fueled by his rapacity and the emotions poured in by others who despise him for his actions. This turned him into the personification of ruin and marked the true start of the Paldean Empire's downfall. Now, we've established the powers and the significance of the disc Pokemon, and how it connects to other legendaries as well. So, that should be it, right? Well, when looking at the ruined Pokemon again, there's something familiar. According to their abilities, each of the ruined Pokemon have epithets: the Beads of Ruin, the Vessel of Ruin, the Sword of Ruin, and the Tablet of Ruin. Yet, this naming convention isn't new. We've seen it before, and in fact, we've seen it on a specific Pokemon several generations ago, one that's never even been accessible. The Light of Ruin, the signature move of AZ's Floette, is the final puzzle piece, and I've been restraining myself this entire time from talking about it, but it truly does put everything in place, as even AZ's Floette is given the title the Eternal Flower, which matches the naming scheme of the Paradox Pokemon. When AZ's Floette died in battle, he was disparaged and made a crystalline machine with 6 petals, reminiscent of Floette's flower, to bring back his partner. These crystals are eerily reminiscent of the ones in AreaZero, and we know Kalos is next to Paldea as implied by the DLC and home leaks. So it doesn't seem illogical for AZ, a royal, to have the knowledge and power to excavate crystals from AreaZero for his machine. These crystals that responded to desire would explain how the Floette was able to come back. The disc Pokemon's light gave it life, turning it into a paradox, a dead being that has eternal life, unable to die. AZ's emanating anger would result in the machine originally made to restore life, ironically being used to take it. It's a really interesting parallel considering the time machine was originally made to bring Pokemon from different timelines to the present, but it would eventually be used to transport something away from the present. Both machines a product of desire and greed, being used opposite to their original function by the end of the story. If we're stating that the ancient weapon was created using terrestrialized crystals, then this would also by proxy mean that the disc Pokemon was responsible for the existence of Mega Evolution. The infinity energy from Yvelatl and Xerneas, when fueling the ancient weapon, created using the crystals of the disc Pokemon, would allow them to be responsible for the creation of the Megastones. And this is even speculated in the game itself, as Roaring Moon's Dex entry directly states that it's similar to a phenomenon in another region, referring to Mega Evolution. Even Iron Thorns and Iron Valiant share some similar features to their Mega Evolution counterparts. The Anisar City sundial is also interesting to think about now, as it's linked to Mega Evolution and the fact that when light shines upon it, the ball reacts to it rotating 6 rings, allowing the player to find hidden Megastones found only under certain light. Despite being crystal, they don't actually bear much of a resemblance to the Terra crystals in AreaZero. You can stretch and say it matches the Terra shards or the Terra raid crystals, but again, that's stretching. Although again, this entire video is stretching. But I think it's worth noting, since the existence of moondials are in fact real, as confirmed in game, and I fully believe we'll see them in the DLC, hopefully with a better connection to Mega Evolution. So yeah, that's basically it, right? AZ uses the disc Pokemon's power and indirectly creates Mega Evolution 3,000 years ago. Wait, 3,000 years ago? What is that? Oh, that was the darkest day! Could the ancient weapon be the reason for Eternatus awakening? We know they exist in the same universe since Beed's actions are mentioned directly in Mesagoza. So that would mean the disc Pokemon is not only responsible for Mega Evolution, but also Dynamax. Is there some sort of way it could connect to Necrozma and the Z moves of Alola? Well, unfortunately no. Or at least, not yet. A lot of this video has kind of just been me wrapping these theories together and finding connections, but this is one that's genuinely stumped me. I can't find a direct connection or causation to the events that happened in Alola, or at least not yet, since we don't know what DLC could give. But on the topic of the DLC, it's most likely going to be just Southern Kalos. And if we're talking about Southern France, it's interesting to note that the disc Pokemon also seems to be based on the Tarrasque, a mythological dragon from that region of France. So I fully suspect a lot of our questions will be answered by then. And yet, there's still other mysteries as well that I don't fully understand. Like, how does Zygarde fit into this? It also has a theme related to hexagons, but it seems like the lore is setting the disc Pokemon up to be an opposite force to it. What is the hourglass, and why does it have all the cities on it? Why does this symbol show up in the Scarlet and Violet book and in Sada and Turo's room? There's just a lot of information that we don't know, and because of that, I fully expect many of the things I said in these videos to end up being wrong. But that's okay, because this is honestly some of the most fun I've ever had theorizing in a Pokemon game. And just for fun, here's a timeline of important events relating to the theory. 1 million years ago, the crater was formed presumably by an impact. 20,000 years ago, Eternatus would then crash on a meteor, but still reside in its slumber. Then, 3,000 years ago, AreaZero would activate the ancient weapon, and the darkest day would occur somewhere around the similar time. Then, 2,000 years ago, the Paldean Empire would explore AreaZero in search of treasure, only for the king's greed to backfire somewhere during the 1,000 years, as it would collect the ruined Pokemon and unintentionally start the ruination of the Paldean Empire. 500 years ago, Solgaleo and Lunala would meet the Alolan King and bestow the power of Z-moves and Cosmog. 200 years from the present, Heath would journey into AreaZero and be responsible for the existence of many of the Paradox Pokemon by writing them in the books. 60 years later, the first terrestrialized Pokemon would be found, and 10 years ago, Turo and Sada would optimize it to be used outside of the crater. And well, that's it. If there's anything I missed, or if you guys have your own ideas, please comment down below, because I'd love to see other ideas and discuss what possibilities the DLC could hold. You guys are amazing, and I'm so incredibly thankful for the amount of support I got on my last video. There were a lot of really great ideas, and one that stood out to me was how the time machine spins and opens similarly to Glamora, as if it was modeled after it. Kind of how like the ancient weapon was modeled after Floette. So yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Like, comment, and subscribe. And again, just thank you so much. I'm going to be producing more content. It's looking like one video a week for now, but yeah, adios.